Welcome to our broadcast. Welcome. Welcome to our broadcast. Welcome. MSC election njinji ejibenu chai Mr. Peter B. Wegabano Tribunal Ebelebe Ebubenu Alahaja Tikabu Bakejebene Kagachano Batano Gaba Supreme Court Ikpe bielano Umigbo nọ n'iwe ndị mmadụ nọ n'akwa amụma Maxwell buru omezuwo onu n'elu ụwa m Umigbo eziokwu nọ na nga Nnamdi Kanu nọ na nga eziokwu nọ na nga United Nations judgment has set him free. Let him go. Let him go. Let him go. That is exactly where we are in our enlightenment broadcast, bringing to you a very important update that is so valuable. Nobody can ever sweep the very document under the carpet. It is not possible. They cannot be able to do so. This very document is both generational and transgenerational. In other words, it goes beyond this very present generation. I am welcoming you to our first segment of Enlightenment broadcast today. Today is the 12th of April 2024, and I am Pst Maxwell. Now, I am so pleased to welcome you. Looking at the caption of our broadcast today, United Nations allegations in relation to Nigeria over Nnamdi Kanu. That is the focus of our broadcast today. United Nations allegations in relation to Nigeria over Nnamdi Kanu. Over the case of Nnamdi Kanu in the course of his abduction from Nigeria, from Kenya to Nigeria. What are they saying over the case of Nnamdi Kanu? What is the allegation? What is the substantive aspect of the allegation? What is the conclusion? What is the evidence beyond every shred of doubt? Allegation in relation to Nigeria. We are going to take it from this very paragraph, the paragraph 65, and we move down to allegations in relation to Nigeria. We are taking it from the paragraph 65. If you are just joining us, to understand where we are coming from, it is important you search through the video archives, live video archives on the very platform Engine Speak. You can as well search in the search box, Pst Maxwell Nnamdi. You will see all the broadcasts I've ever made on this very platform. If you go to YouTube, the same. If you go to Google search engine, search Pst Maxwell Nnamdi or Maxwell Nnamdi, you will see all my broadcasts, all my teachings and preachings and prophecies, whether it has to do with Nnamdi Kanu, whether it has to do with any issue at all. We have been broadcasting all the way from the very first paragraph, as you can see on the screen. This document contains 114 paragraphs. This is paragraph 13. We have broadcasted on this. 14, we have broadcasted on it. All the way to the paragraph 65, where we are beginning from today, which is the concluding part of the category 3 of the United Nations judgment. We have seen the category 1, we have seen the category 2, and we are concluding the category 3 with these few paragraphs. And immediately we are going into another dimension, aspect or component of this very document. We take it now. Paragraph 65. The working group thus concludes that the arrest and detention of Mr. Nnamdi Kanu in Kenya violated his fair trial rights and was therefore arbitrary under category 3. That is the conclusion under this very category 3 of the United Nations judgment. His arrest and detention in Kenya violated his right to fair trials. His right. He has a right. The accused is presumed innocent before the law until convicted. His right to fair trial was violated by his arrest and detention in Kenya, based on the circumstances, the way and manner in which he was arrested, tortured, detained, as we have broadcasted before now. And it is therefore arbitrary under the category 3. Remember, if he was not arrested in Kenya, Nigeria wouldn't have had the opportunity to bring him back to face trial. It was his arrest in Kenya that gave the Nigeria the opportunity, outside the law, contrary to the law, to bring him back, to abduct him and bring him back forcibly. So Kenya helped Nigeria in this very criminal act. I'm not the one saying it is criminal act. That is the judgment of the United Nations. They broke the law. It is criminal. That is the judgment of the UN, not the judgment of Maxwell, not the judgment of any other person. If you should be angry, don't be angry with me. Be angry with the United Nations. And the question is, why will you be angry over a sound judgment that is devoid of racism, political influence, or prejudice? You will answer that very question by your conscience. That is what they said. that the arrest of Nnamdi Kanu and his detention in Kenya violated his rights to fair trials. Therefore, it was arbitrary. It was not according to the law. It was not constitutional. It was not legal. It was illegal under international laws. Paragraph 66. Finally, the working group must address the collusion between the governments of Kenya and Nigeria that resulted in Mazi Nnamdi Kanu's rendition to Nigeria. Collusion. There was a collusion, not cooperation, not working in synergy between one government or the other in order to profile a solution that will ensure security in the region or in the continent. This was a collusion to do evil, to break the law. 16 Cohen laws were broken by these two countries, Kenya and Nigeria, over Nnamdi Kanu. Finally, the working group must address the collusion between the governments of Kenya and Nigeria that resulted in Mr. Kanu's rendition to Nigeria. Indeed, it has already been affirmed by Nigeria's Attorney General that Kenyan authorities colluded with the Nigerian authorities, which resulted in Mr. Kanu's rendition to Nigeria. And the working group has established such collusion in the present opinion too. In the present opinion as well. The working group therefore finds that the government of Kenya is jointly responsible with the government of Nigeria for the arrest, detention, and extraordinary rendition of Mr. Kanu to Nigeria, as well as for any violations of his rights that took place in Nigeria and Kenya. I am suggesting to the legal team of Nnamdi Kanu that Kenya should be dragged to court. Kenya should be dragged to court. These very two governments that were responsible for this evil, for the perpetration of this very injustice against Nnamdi Kanu and the Biafran people by extension, they should pay for it. They should pay for all the torture, for all the abuse of his fundamental human rights. They should pay for it. Legal action must be taken against the Kenyan government. We have seen that in that very judgment, Kenya and Nigeria was not spared by the United Nations. The United Nations said the truth very clearly, the fact before them, the evidence submitted before them, looking into all the merits of the submission, they came up with this very judgment condemning the act of the two countries, the two governments. Finally, the working group must address the collusion between the governments of Kenya and Nigeria that resulted in Nnamdi Kanu's rendition to Nigeria. Indeed, it has already been affirmed by the Nigeria's Attorney General that the Kenyan authorities colluded with the Nigerian authorities, which resulted in Mr. Kanu's rendition to Nigeria, and the working group has established such collusion in the present opinion too. The working group therefore finds that the government of Kenya is jointly responsible with the government of Nigeria for the arrest, detention, and extraordinary rendition of Mr. Kanu to Nigeria, as well as for any violations of his rights that took place in Nigeria and Kenya. They were all responsible. They worked together, and they thought they were doing themselves a lot of good to defend whatever interest they think is ought defended by breaking international laws. They never saw that the United Nations will come into this matter. They never saw it. They never saw that the voice of justice is going to echo all the way from the United Nations down to where they are in Africa. to hold them to account over this very joint criminal act that they carried out against this very great man, the leader of over 70 million people, Nnamdi Kanu. If you are just joining us, I am Pastor Maxwell. This is our enlightenment broadcast. Share the broadcast. When you share it, you are helping to spread the truth, and you are helping to call for justice for over 70 million indigenous people. Whether you have anything to benefit directly as an individual or not, life is not all about our individual differences or interests. Sometimes we have to do certain things for the sake of humanity. We must allow our consciences to direct us aright to do what is right at all times, including helping to spread the truth. We are looking at another section of this very enlightenment broadcast, which is allegation in relation to Nigeria, beginning from the paragraph 67. The working group thanks the government for its reply, albeit short, and only stating that since the proceedings against Mr. Kanu are ongoing in national courts, any reaction by the federal government of Nigeria will be unconscionable. I have analyzed this in the previous broadcasts. It is important you avail yourself of the previous broadcast to know all the analysis before this very broadcast we are making right now. We said a lot. In the opening of this broadcast, I also referred you to the previous broadcasts. Search them on Google, you will see them. Search them here on Engine Speak, you will see them. Search them on Twitter, search them on Facebook. They're all over the place. The working group thanks the government of Nigeria for its reply, albeit short. The reply of the government of Nigeria was very, very short. It was very, very short in the sense that they never knew that the United Nations will step into the case of Nnamdi Kanu. They were shocked. They were taken aback. They never saw it coming. So when they were asked to respond to all the allegations that were submitted against them over their role in the rendition of Nnamdi Kanu, they lacked words to defend themselves. They couldn't speak, as they usually write on the pages of different national dailies to deceive those who are unsuspecting and who lack the discipline to search, to read between the lines of what they are being told. Very short reply. And they stated that since the case against Nnamdi Kanu is ongoing in the court of Nigeria, that any reaction by the federal government of Nigeria will be unconscionable, will be unreasonable. This very opportunity that was given to them to respond was based on the law, not based on reason, not based on the government reasoning or what is expedient or not. What is cautionable or uncautionable as the government defines it may not be the same in the eyes of the international laws. That was the response they made, or the response they made in regard to the allegation that was made against them at the United Nations. And this very UN working group is saying it is very short, and they never liked it. They were upset. It was a spite on this very global body. And let us see what they have to say in the next paragraph 68. In this regard, as a preliminary issue, the working group wishes to clarify that the procedural rules, which has to do with rules that has to do with procedures, procedural, okay? Procedure, talking of procedure, rules that are supposed to be observed in such a procedure. Okay, we must continue. In this regard, as a preliminary issue, the working group wishes to clarify that the procedural rules applicable to communications from sources and responses of government are contained in its method of work and in no other international instrument that the parties might consider applicable. In this regard, what regard? Allegations in relation to Nigeria's role over the extraordinary rendition of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu from Kenya to Nigeria. In this regard, in the regard of all the law that they broke, all the constitutional subversions and somersault and the miscarriages of justice, to ensure that this innocent man is forced into a dungeon that has only one tiny window underground, under different kind of inhumane and degrading treatment. In this regard, as a preliminary issue, the working group wishes to clarify that the procedural rules applicable to communications from sources and responses of government are contained in its methods of work and in no other international instrument that the parties might consider applicable. In other words, they can never go out of the hook of this very method of work of the international body, this very global body, United Nations. They cannot find any escape route from any other international instrument. I hope you are following. I hope you are really following what they are stating here, very, very clear in black and white. That if the Nigerian government is trying to look for escape routes in order to dodge this very judgment, to justify their reasons for extraordinarily renditioning Nnamdi Kanu from Kenya to Nigeria, and they are trying to rely on any other international instrument. They are trying to rely on any other international law. Are you following? Which they may consider to be applicable in this very instant case. I hope you are following. The working group is saying here that it is clarifying, it is making it very clear that the procedural rules applicable to communications from sources and responses of government are contained in its own method of work. So no way for Nigeria to escape. It is only contained in its own method of work and in no other international instrument that the parties, who are the parties, Kenya and Nigeria, might consider applicable. You choke them. Forgive me. I am laughing because this is so interesting. This is very, very interesting. It is very, very interesting to know that there is no escape route for both Nigeria and Kenya, more especially Nigeria, when it comes to what the UN judgment says over the case of Nnamdi Kanu. There is no other international instrument that they can use to escape, which they may think it is applicable in this case. We must continue. Its method of work contains no applicable rule impeding or impeding the consideration of communications due to the lack of exhaustion of domestic remedies in the country concerned. I hope you're following. Its method of work contains no applicable rule impeding the consideration of communications due to the lack of exhaustion of domestic remedies in the country concerned. Sources have no obligation, therefore, to exhaust domestic remedies before sending a communication to the working group, and equally, nothing prevents the working group from engaging with the allegations of arbitrary detention in cases when the international proceedings are still ongoing. We must continue. And very soon we are going to bring this very segment of the Enlightenment broadcast to an end, because we have a lot in our hands. What we are doing is sacrificial, dedicating our time, abandoning my pastoral work, abandoning my pastoral duties, which I owe my members, and by extension, other people who are looking up to me. This is also part of my ministerial work. This is also part of my pastoral duty as a clergyman, as a man of God, as an overseer. Just like in the case and in the days of Elijah, Elisha, Jeremiah, Nehemiah, just like in the days of the prophet Isaiah, in the days of Habakkuk, in the days of Zechariah, in the days of Obadiah, in the days of Nahum, just like in the days of Prophet Samuel, the judge of Israel. I could go on and on. They all spoke in their own time for the national interest, not the parochial interest of a few collection of people, a few breed of greedy people, but in the interest of justice, in the interest of peace, in the interest of progress, in the interest of that which is pure, in the interest of that which is honest before God and before man. What I'm doing is still the work of God, speaking for our nation and our generation in the light of the truth, which is the only yardstick that God has provided in John chapter 8, verse 32, that will set us free. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Paragraph 69, which will be the last paragraph in this very segment of Enlightenment broadcast. Touring to the substance of the allegations, the source report. Who is the source? Bruce Fein. I've explained this over and over again, just for the records, for those that are joining for the first time, who are coming across this very broadcast for the first time. The source. Whenever you see the source in this very document, in the judgment of the United Nations, it is making reference to the person who came and submitted this very information and report over the case of Nnamdi Kanu. And that is the International Attorney of Nnamdi Kanu, Bruce Fein, the former Deputy Attorney General of the United States of America. The source reports that following his rendition to Nigeria, Mr. Kanu was reportedly detained in solitary confinement within the headquarters of the Department of State Security Services, the department in Abuja, Nigeria, before the federal government of Nigeria. He was initially charged with 4 offenses. Number 1, conspiracy to commit treasonable felony in 2014 and in 2015. Number 2, treasonable felony in 2014 and 2015. Number 3, defamation in 2015. And number 4, improper importation of goods in 2015. All of which the source claims related to old events. These charges were later amended to include accusations of levying war against Nigeria in 2015 through a radio broadcast from London. And with this, we bring this segment of our Enlightenment broadcast to an end. See you soon in other segments of our broadcast today. As I always say, Justice for one is justice for all. It may be Nnamdi Kanu today. It may be your turn tomorrow. Remember the golden rule. Whatever you want others to do to you, do the same to them. If you love injustice, if you want yourself to be locked up, locked away, detained, subjected to a similar condition of Nnamdi Kanu, if you want the same to happen to you in the future, continue to fight against his release and continue to hate and propagate a strong message of hate and opposition to his release. Bye from here.